He worked his hands to the bone, fixing everyone else's vehicles, but when his own old truck broke down, his daughter stepped in. She fixed it for free. What happened next? A flatbed pulled in, and what rolled off changed their lives forever. The garage smelled of oil and steel, the kind of scent that clung to a man's hands no matter how many times he washed them. Marcus had worked there for 20 years, his knuckles scarred, his palms toughened, his back bent but unbroken. Cars came and went, each one leaving with a little bit of his sweat and effort, but his customers rarely saw the cost. To most, Marcus was just the mechanic, a man they relied on when their machines failed, and then quickly forgot about once the wheels turned smooth again. But to his daughter, Jasmine, Marcus was more than a man with grease under his nails. He was a craftsman, a teacher, and a hero. Every afternoon after school, Jasmine would wander into the shop, still in her uniform, backpack slung over one shoulder. She never announced herself, but Marcus always knew she was there. He'd glance over his shoulder, see her leaning against the tool cabinet, watching with wide eyes, and smile. "You should be doing homework," he would tease, tightening a bolt or wiping sweat from his brow. "I learn more here," Jasmine would shoot back with a grin. And in many ways, she did. She watched the way her father diagnosed a rattling engine just by listening, the way he coaxed stubborn parts into place, the way he spoke to customers with honesty, even when it cost him business. Marcus didn't have much, but what he did have was pride. Pride in his work, pride in his honesty, pride in the daughter who never tired of learning. In the corner of the garage sat his old pickup truck, a battered, rust-streaked relic that had seen better days. The paint was chipped, the seat cushions worn, and the engine groaned even. Right time it turned over. But to Marcus, that truck was priceless. It had been his father's before him, and countless memories were tied up in its dented frame, late-night drives, fishing trips, moments when life was simpler. "Why don't you just get rid of it?" customers sometimes asked, eyeing the relic in the corner. Marcus would shake his head. "Some things you don't measure in dollars," he'd say. "This truck, it's family." Jasmine understood. She had spent hours sitting in that passenger seat, listening to her father talk about life as the radio hummed softly. To her, the truck wasn't just a machine, it was a piece of him. But the garage wasn't easy. Business had slowed in recent years as newer, shinier repair shops opened in town with digital diagnostics and gleaming showrooms. Marcus's shop was old-fashioned. Handwritten receipts, manual tools, trust built on reputation. It wasn't enough to make him rich, but it kept food on the table. And it kept Jasmine dreaming. She admired the way her father's hands never hesitated, the way he found solutions where others saw scrap. She wanted to be like him, strong, dependable, able to create something lasting out of broken pieces. Yet Marcus, like many fathers, hoped for something more for her. He wanted her to have opportunities he never had, to rise above the hard labor that wore him down each year. He encouraged her studies, pushed her toward college, and told her she was capable of anything. But Jasmine's heart was in the garage, and though she respected his wishes, she also knew she carried a piece of his gift inside her. She often lingered late, asking questions about torque, horsepower, and carburetors. Marcus answered patiently, though sometimes with a tired smile. He didn't realize how much she was absorbing, how much she was preparing herself, not just to be his daughter, but to one day stand beside him as an équipier. The old truck in the corner, silent and stubborn, became their unspoken bond. Marcus saw it as his legacy, Jasmine as her opportunity. Neither knew how soon that truck would test everything they had built together. Because one morning it would refuse to start. And in that moment, father and daughter would discover just how much of his pride had already become hers. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air felt sharp in the lungs and the sun rose with a golden edge. Marcus shuffled out of his small house, coffee in one hand and his keys in the other. The garage was only a short drive away, but he always preferred to take his old pickup, the relic that had carried him through most of his life. The truck grumbled awake as usual, coughing smoke before finding its rhythm. Marcus patted the cracked dashboard. "Come on, old girl, we've got another day to get through." But halfway down the road, something changed. The engine sputtered, louder than it ever had before, and the familiar rumble gave way to silence. Marcus's heart dropped. He coasted to the side of the road, the truck rolling to a reluctant stop. He turned the key once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. The silence was deafening. Marcus sat there for a long moment, staring at the wheel, his jaw tight. It wasn't just a truck, it was a lifeline. His work relied on transportation, and though he repaired cars for a living, repairing this one would cost money he didn't have. The irony wasn't lost on him. The mechanic who could fix anyone else's ride couldn't afford to fix his own. With a heavy sigh, he climbed out and popped the hood. Steam hissed, metal groaned. He leaned over, scanning wires, belts and valves. It was worse than he feared. A major failure, not a quick fix. "Damn it," he muttered, slamming the hood shut, his fists clenched at his sides. By the time he managed to tow the truck back to his garage, customers were already waiting. He plastered on a calm expression, hiding the storm inside. He smiled at Mrs. Turner when she came in with her minivan, reassured Mr. Lopez about his brakes, and gave advice to a young man worried about his first car. All the while, the truck sat in the corner of the shop, silent and accusing. During lunch, Jasmine wandered in, her usual bounce tempered by curiosity. "What's wrong with the truck, Dad?" she asked, setting her backpack down on a workbench. Marcus rubbed his temples. "She's tired. Might be the end of the road this time." Jasmine frowned. "You always said some things can't be measured in dollars. You're not going to scrap her, are you?" Marcus sighed, looking at the faded paint, the rust creeping along the edges, the dents that told stories only he remembered. "I don't want to. But the parts, they cost money I don't have. And time. I can't afford either right now." It was rare for Jasmine to see her father defeated. He was the man who could coax life out of engines others abandoned. To hear resignation in his voice was unsettling. That night, after the shop closed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out before him. Jasmine watched him from the doorway. He didn't see her, but she noticed the slump of his shoulders, the lines on his face carved deeper by worry. She knew then that this wasn't just about the truck. It was about pride, about legacy, about her father holding on to the one thing that had carried him through his hardest years. Jasmine lay awake in bed, thinking. She had learned so much from him, more than he realized. She knew her way around an engine, knew the tools, the rhythms, the patience required. Maybe she couldn't fix everything, but she could try. And if she failed, at least she would have tried for him. Her mind made up, she drifted into sleep, the sound of the old truck's failing engine echoing in her dreams. What Marcus didn't know was that his daughter had already decided. This wasn't the end of the road. Not for the truck. Not for him. The next day, after school, Jasmine would roll up her sleeves and take her place beside the man she admired most. Not as a child watching, but as a mechanic ready to fight for his pride. The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of Marcus's garage, casting long stripes of light across the concrete floor. The steady ticking of a cooling engine echoed faintly, mingling with the faint smell of oil and rubber. Marcus was still with a customer when Jasmine slipped quietly through the side door, her schoolbag slung carelessly over one shoulder. Her eyes went straight to the truck. It sat there like a wounded animal, silent, heavy, waiting. The hood was propped open, its engine laid bare, as though begging for attention. To most people, it was a heap of rust and broken dreams. To Jasmine, it was a challenge. She set her backpack down on the counter, tied her hair back, and walked toward the workbench, her small fingers curled around a wrench, the weight of it familiar from years of sneaking lessons when her father wasn't looking. Jasmine had watched Marcus for years, watched the way he leaned in close to listen to an engine, the way his hands seemed to feel what was wrong before he ever confirmed it with tools. She didn't have his years of experience, but she had something else, determination. Sliding onto the stool beside the truck, she leaned in and examined the tangled mess of parts. She whispered under her breath, "Okay, girl, let's see what you've got left." At first, the task seemed daunting. Belts, hoses, screws. It was overwhelming. But then she remembered Guy, her father, always broke problems down. Start small, look for the obvious. Machines talk if you listen. She pulled out her phone, quickly searching diagrams and repair videos. Each step reminded her of a lesson Marcus had once explained in passing, never realizing she was memorizing every word. Slowly, methodically, she began to work. Her hands moved with a blend of caution and confidence. She loosened bolts, replaced frayed wires, tightened connections. She got grease under her fingernails, oil on her shirt, and sweat beading along her forehead. Time seemed to blur. At one point, she cut her finger on a sharp edge of metal. She winced, sucking in a breath but then smiled faintly through the sting. Dad always said blood's just proof you're working hard. She wrapped it with a rag and kept going. Every turn of the wrench felt like an act of defiance, not against her father, but against the idea that she was too young, too inexperienced. She wasn't trying to prove him wrong. She was trying to prove herself right. The sound of the front doorbell jingling startled her. Marcus's voice drifted into the garage as he said goodbye to the last customer of the day. Jasmine's heart pounded. She didn't want him to catch her too soon, not before she had a chance to finish. Working faster, she double-checked connections, wiped her hands on her jeans, and climbed into the driver's seat. The old truck smelled like leather and dust, like memories she didn't want to let go. She gripped the key, whispering to herself, "Come on, old girl. Work with me." She turned the ignition. At first, nothing happened. Her chest tightened. Then, with a cough, a sputter, and a deep roar, the engine came alive. It wasn't smooth, it rattled and growled, but it was running because she had brought it back. Her grin spread wide, her eyes shining. She had done it. Marcus appeared in the doorway just in time to see his daughter sitting proudly behind the wheel, the engine humming. His eyes widened. "Jasmine, what are you doing?" She hopped out of the truck, hands black with grease, face glowing with triumph. "I fixed her, Dad." Marcus stared at the truck, then at his daughter. Words failed him. He had taught her without even realizing it. And now she had done what he thought was impossible. For a long moment, the garage was silent, except for the rumble of the engine. Then Marcus's expression softened, and he let out a shaky laugh. You fixed her," he whispered, pulling her into a hug. His voice cracked as he added, "You're your father's daughter." For Jasmine, it wasn't just a repair. It was a declaration. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was ready to stand beside him, wrench in hand, as his equal. And though Marcus didn't say it out loud, a part of him knew that day marked the beginning of something greater. His daughter wasn't just learning, she was building a legacy. Marcus wasn't an easy man to surprise. Years of fixing cars for customers who swore they'd told him the full story had taught him to expect the unexpected. But when he walked into the garage that evening and heard his old pickup humming like it hadn't in months, he froze. The sound was rough, but alive. A heartbeat where there should have been silence. His eyes darted to the truck, then to Jasmine, who stood proudly by the hood with grease smeared across her cheeks and hands. "You?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jasmine nodded, her grin as wide as the horizon. "I fixed her, Dad. I couldn't just let her sit there." Marcus stepped closer, his eyes scanning the engine, the neatly tightened bolts, the replaced wires. His trained hands confirmed what his eyes already knew, the words. It had been done right. Not rushed, not sloppy, careful, thoughtful, steady. "How?" he asked, shaking his head in disbelief. "How did you—" "I've been watching you for years," Jasmine interrupted, her voice full of pride. "Every nut you turned, every trick you used, I paid attention, Dad. And when I didn't know, I looked it up. I couldn't stand seeing you so tired, worrying about her. You've given so much to me. I wanted to give something back." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat tight. He had always thought Jasmine's time in the shop was just a phase, a child hanging around her father out of habit. But standing there, covered in grease, eyes shining with determination, she wasn't just a child anymore. She was a mechanic in her own right. For a moment, Marcus saw himself in her, the same fire, the same stubborn refusal to let broken things stay broken. He chuckled softly, a sound that was half pride and half awe. "You fixed her," he said again, almost as if saying it aloud might help him believe it. Jasmine beamed. "Told you I was learning more here than in school." Marcus laughed, and before she could react, he pulled her into a hug. His strong, calloused hands wrapped around her small frame, and for the first time in years, Jasmine felt the weight of her father's pride. "You have no idea," he whispered into her hair, "how much this means to me." The next few days carried a glow neither of them could shake. Marcus drove the truck to work, the engine still rough but dependable. Customers noticed. Some laughed and said, "Didn't think she had another mile left in her." Others shook their heads in amazement. But when Marcus explained who had fixed it, the story began to spread. At first, it was just among a few customers. Soon, neighbors came by to ask if it was true, if his daughter had really brought the old beast back to life. Marcus never exaggerated. He didn't. The need to. The truth was powerful enough. He told them proudly, "Yeah, Jasmine fixed her. My girl did it." Jasmine, embarrassed but glowing, would hide behind him whenever he bragged. But deep inside, her chest swelled with pride. It wasn't about recognition, it was about the look in her father's eyes when he said those words, the same look he had when talking about his own father's lessons. The garage became more than a workplace. It became a storybook, where each customer left not just with a repaired car, but with a story about the little girl who had done what even seasoned mechanics thought unlikely. For Marcus, gratitude filled him like fuel. Gratitude for his daughter's courage, gratitude for her determination, gratitude for the reminder that legacy wasn't something you passed down, it was something you lived together. He knew life would throw harder challenges at them both, and he knew the truck wasn't fully out of danger, but for now, it was running, and more importantly, so was his hope. Neither father nor daughter knew what was coming next. Weeks later, when the sound of a flatbed pulling up outside the garage would mark the start of a new chapter. But for that moment, in the dim light of the garage, surrounded by tools, oil, and laughter, Marcus realized he had already been given the greatest gift a father could ask for, a daughter who carried his pride not as a burden, but as her own. The weeks that followed seemed brighter somehow. Marcus's truck still rattled and groaned, but it moved under its own power, and every mile felt like a victory. For him, it wasn't about the machine anymore. It was about what it represented. Every turn of the key reminded him of Jasmine's determination, her quiet confidence, and the pride that welled up in him each time he glanced at her. Customers still teased him about keeping the old beast alive. Some chuckled, others shook their heads in disbelief. But now, in Satids, tired of defending the truck himself, Marcus would smile and say, "Ask my daughter. She's the one who gave her another chance." And Jasmine, who once stood quietly in the corners of the shop, began to walk taller. She helped with small jobs, fetched tools, even diagnosed the occasional simple problem. Marcus guided her carefully, always reminding her not to rush, not to cut corners. She absorbed it all, eager and hungry, the way Marcus once had been with his own father. Life, for a time, felt steady. Then one crisp morning, just as the sun was climbing over the rooftops, Marcus heard a low rumble outside the garage. He frowned. It wasn't a car in distress, nor the hum of a passing truck. This sound was heavier, deliberate, the growl of a flatbed hauling weight. He stepped outside, wiping his hands on a rag, and there it was, a massive flatbed truck pulling into the lot, sunlight glinting off its polished metal sides. On the back, covered with a tarp, sat something large. Marcus's brow furrowed. "Did we order something?" he muttered to himself. The flatbed came to a stop. A man in a cap hopped down from the cab, clipboard in hand. "Marcus Green?" he called out. "That's me," Marcus said cautiously. "Got a delivery for you." Marcus blinked. "Delivery? I didn't order anything." The driver grinned, tapping the clipboard. "Doesn't matter. It's already paid for. Says here it's a gift." Before Marcus could protest, the driver climbed onto the bed and yanked the tarp away. The sunlight spilled over gleaming metal, chrome edges, and a powerhouse of machinery. Marcus's eyes widened. It was an engine. Brand new, not just any engine, one that looked like it had been built to roar, stronger, more modern, powerful enough to breathe new life into his old truck. Marcus stood frozen, his rag slipping from his hand to the ground. This can't be right. Engines like that goes." "Said more than I make in months," the driver shrugged. "Not my business. Just told to deliver it. Signature here, please." Jasmine had appeared in the doorway, eyes wide as saucers. "Dad, is that—" Marcus could only nod, his chest tight. He signed the paper with trembling hands, watching as the driver lowered the engine carefully onto the lot. "Who sent this?" Marcus asked once more. The driver smirked. "Anonymous, but if I had to guess, it's someone who thought you and your girl deserved a little help." And with that, the flatbed rumbled away, leaving father and daughter staring at the gleaming gift. For a long moment, neither spoke. The morning air was filled only with the ticking of cooling metal and the distant hum of the city. Finally, Jasmine whispered, "Dad, this is for the truck. We can rebuild her completely." Marcus turned to his daughter, eyes glistening. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but gratitude hit him hard, like a weight he couldn't shake. He thought of the customers who had seen Jasmine's work, of the people who heard the story of the girl who brought her father's truck back to life. Somewhere out there, one of them had decided to repay kindness with kindness. He knelt beside Jasmine, resting a heavy hand on her shoulder. This isn't just for me. This is for us. You started this, baby girl. You showed them what you could do, and now we're going to finish it together. Her smile lit up the lot brighter than the morning sun. They didn't know who had given them the gift, and maybe they never would. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the engine gleaming before them, the legacy waiting to be rebuilt, and the bond between a father and daughter stronger than steel. For Marcus, it was more than an engine. It was proof that kindness echoed, that people noticed, that even in a world of noise and indifference, acts of love, like a daughter fixing her father's truck, could ripple outwards until they came back in ways you never expected. And for Jasmine, it was the moment she knew. She wasn't just her father's daughter anymore. She was his partner. The new engine sat like a crown jewel in the middle of the garage, gleaming beneath the fluorescent lights. Marcus and Jasmine had spent days preparing for the swap, cleaning the bay, gathering tools, and laying out every bolt and gasket with precision. For Marcus, it felt like surgery. For Jasmine, it felt like destiny. Together they worked side by side. Marcus guided, explaining each step in his calm, gravelly voice. Jasmine listened, her hands steady, her brow furrowed in concentration. She tightened bolts, fitted parts, and wiped sweat from her forehead without hesitation. She was no longer just watching, she was leading pieces of the process herself. Neighbors stopped by to watch the transformation. Customers lingered after repairs just to catch a glimpse of the father-daughter duo hunched over the old pickup. Some brought food, others offered to help, but most just wanted to witness what had become more than a repair job. It was a story. One evening, after hours of labor, the final connections were made. The old truck, once written off as a relic, now held a heart of fire waiting to roar. Marcus and Jasmine stood together, tools in hand, exhaustion etched into their bodies, but pride radiating from their faces. "You ready?" Marcus asked, handing Jasmine the keys. Her eyes widened. "Me? But it's your truck." He shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. "Not anymore. This is our truck now. You started this. You should be the one to finish it." Jasmine swallowed hard, nerves tangling with excitement. She slid into the driver's seat, the familiar cracked leather warm beneath her. Her fingers trembled as they wrapped around the key. Marcus stood just outside, his arms crossed, his chest tight with anticipation. Jasmine turned the ignition. Together they would rebuild not just a truck, but a dream. For a heartbeat, silence. Then, with a deep growl and a powerful surge, the new engine roared to life. The sound filled the garage, shaking the walls, rattling tools on shelves, and echoing like thunder in Marcus's chest. Jasmine let out a laugh, pure, unrestrained joy, and Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. He hadn't cried since his father's funeral, but tonight, pride broke through the walls he had built over a lifetime. "She's alive," Jasmine whispered, stroking the steering wheel. Marcus leaned against the hood, grinning through the blur in his vision. "No, baby girl. She's more than alive. She's reborn." News spread quickly. By the weekend, locals gathered outside the shop, clapping and cheering as Marcus and Jasmine rolled the truck out into the sunlight. The paint was still chipped, the body still dented, but the sound of that engine, smooth, steady, powerful, drowned out every imperfection. It wasn't just a truck anymore, it was a symbol of legacy, of resilience, of a father passing down not just knowledge, but pride, and a daughter proving herself capable of carrying it forward. One older customer, Mr. Harris, patted Marcus on the back. "You've raised more than a mechanic, Marcus. You've raised a legacy." Marcus smiled, his gaze fixed on Jasmine as she basked in the glow of accomplishment. He didn't need to say it out loud, but inside he knew Mr. Harris was right. That night, after the crowd had gone and the garage was quiet again, Marcus and Jasmine sat on the tailgate of the truck, watching the stars. The engine ticked softly as it cooled, like a heartbeat winding down from a sprint. "You know," Marcus said, breaking the silence, "this truck will outlive me now, and when I'm gone, people will still remember who brought her back." Jasmine leaned her head against his shoulder. "When that day comes, I'll still be here, keeping her alive, keeping Xiao and US alive." Marcus wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. That's all a father could ever hope for. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by oil-stained floors and shelves of tools, the green garage felt more like a cathedral than a workshop. Not because of the machines, but because of the bond forged there, a bond stronger than steel, louder than engines, and brighter than any chrome. The old pickup, once dismissed as scrap, now rumbled as a testament to love, perseverance, and family. And in that moment, Marcus and Jasmine both knew this wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new legacy,